is when I think of absorbent mind having the most impact, is when they're taking all that into account, what they're seeing, what they're learning, what they're observing.
Good. Yes. So actually, Maria Montessori has a whole book called The Absorbent Mind. It was probably one of her most popular reads. It can be very hefty in the beginning. It's, she starts literally from embryonic stage. And so if you're not in the right state of mind to read it, it can be much, but the hope is eventually we'll have a reference section in our own library, and maybe even a digital, reference section for parents to refer to, that, we can have all of these sort of Montessori resources for you. If you ever have any questions, a lot of times teachers, not a lot, but sometimes we'll use certain lingo that we're used to, and parents don't know. So that's why I think these Montessori Mornings and parent education nights are so important. So. Okay, so right, the absorbent mind is a mental state that the child has in the first plane of development. And if you were with us for those planes of development, the first plane is from 0 to 6. And right, and if you just think about the age range of 0 to 6, how much learning takes place in that age range, right? We learn how to hold our heads up. We learn how to crawl. We learn how to walk. We learn our native language. We learn the culture. We learn to read. It is sort of the formative years of our life. And I think that's why she so eloquently calls it the absorbent mind. In that stage, the child has no instincts to support life, right? We learn just by living and just by absorbing our environment and everything that we see in it. Again, we acquire movement, language, intelligence, and become a distinctive individual without being taught. Sometimes I wonder, how could, the DNA of my children is exactly the same. How can they be so different, sometimes. And, I guess it sort of begs the question, they are in different environments, just different time zones, right? Not time zones, time ages as they are growing. And again, so within 6 years, you can learn to walk, talk, and communicate. So our work is not to teach, but to help the absorbent mind in its work of development. And I love that quote, right? Because a lot of times, even as we call ourselves, oftentimes we don't call ourselves teachers, we call ourselves directresses or directors. And that truly is because we just want to go along with nature and help that development with that absorbent mind. So a child's learning is different than adults. They do not block out any element. So if you think about a child can have a completely positive environment, and you can compare that to a child who has maybe a negative or an environment that maybe not as beneficial, maybe a violent environment. They take that in regardless, right? So they do not discriminate the information that they are taking in. So they do not discriminate in his absorption. And adults need strong will to challenge ourselves, and it takes self-discipline to learn as adults, right? So as an adult learner, that just means it obviously takes us a lot of self-discipline to learn, but with children in that absorbent mind, it's different. They just take it in just because it's there, if that makes sense. And the child, she says, in that stage does not get tired of learning. That's really what they live for, and that's how they grow. That's how we learn to speak, right? We acquire that language that we hear on a daily basis. And I often thought about in training, a child picks up the language that clearly is being spoken to them, no matter how challenging that language is. So for us as adult learners, learning Mandarin as English language learners would be very challenging. However, growing up in that environment and hearing that language, it absorbs that language and that becomes a language they know. So that's why it is really important to, oftentimes people debate on when a second language should be introduced. And clearly according to this, it should be introduced when they are young, right? Because they have that absorbent mind. It's a lot harder to start a second language when you're older than it is when you are younger. Does anyone have any questions so far? Okay, so the absorbent mind refers to the mind's capacity to take in information and sensations from the world that surround it. So what we call the 0 to 3 is the unconscious period of formation, right? So that's when the child is not conscious of the information they're taking in. The working of the mind is hidden. They see it when they start, and we can only see it when they start talking and moving. So like those first few words or things that they are picking up from their environment when they start walking, what are they drawn to? What are they walking to? Those first words are usually those words that we use very often with them, right? Mom, dad, ball, stuff that they're used to or hearing a lot. So again, they're not aware of what they're learning. They do not try to memorize it. It's just a subconscious memorization. They cannot pull it out or retrieve it. And mostly because of language. But if we ask them, oh, what are you hearing from us? They probably cannot say that. So from 3 to 6, we have the conscious period of formation. And that's when their consciousness obviously starts to develop. They know they're learning. This is when we become readers, typically in this age. This consciousness increases through activities they do. Their will develops. Oftentimes at 3-year-old time range, it can be challenging for parents, and that's because they're developing that will. They become aware of his or her accomplishments. They can follow directions more and more. And we should be giving them more choice in decision making. And certainly they want more choice in decision making. And that's the 3 to 6 range, which is our primary classroom. So that's why choice is very important in that environment. The absorbent mind also adapts to time, place, and culture. And I touched on that a little bit. So no matter, obviously, what the time, the place, or the culture, they just absorb everything that is given to them. They can adapt to any customs, language, social values, food, the way you eat, the way you greet somebody. Obviously, the way we eat typically is with utensils. Sometimes in Asia, they are using, chopsticks. So they just adapt to that and use what they absorb the people around them using. Again, with the greeting, typically in where we're from, we do the handshake. Others can do, a bow, which we actually will have to address when we come back to school. We probably should not be doing handshaking. So we are thinking of some ways, whether it's a namaste, but we also need to be, I think, culturally aware. And that's going to be a discussion that staff and I have as, what's appropriate for us to be doing. Because I think that was my favorite part of the day, was greeting the students in the morning. It's crucial. Can you hear my dog? Is he annoying? I can tell my son to come. Okay. It's crucial to have that introduction. It's a cultural thing, right? The handshake. A lot of times parents or community members can be very impressed when we go somewhere and our students automatically, put out their hand to shake somebody's hand. But it's also important for the teacher because it gives them that bit of eye contact and lets you check in one-on-one with each student as they come in. Truly, it was one of my favorite parts of the day because children often don't hide their emotions well. So you can tell, geez, you had a rough time getting to school this morning, or you seem really happy. And those just 30-second, 60-second conversations that you can have with that child with that handshake is important. But I digress. So we may be doing something different when we are back in person besides the handshake. And I talked about this before. So they learn the language that they are exposed to, no matter how complex, okay? As technology advances, they adapt to these circumstances. Wow, have we seen that in the past year? Even as adults, right? Learning, again, that technology, complicated for some. For me, yes. Our teachers had to take like a Google certification and they have been studying for hours to do that. However, if they were exposed to that when they were younger with that absorbent mind, and we see that, you often see a 1-year-old, a 2-year-old on a phone, on a tablet, and it's amazing that they can navigate how they navigate, but they have, that's the absorbent mind, right? So they are born with possibilities, but they need to observe it in their environment. And so I often think of it, when a child is born, when a baby is born, they're kind of like this blank slate. And we need to make sure that we are putting positive things into that absorbent mind as to let that absorbent mind grow, and making sure we give them lots of rich language and experiences that they can grow on. So also movement and intellect are work in harmony. So again, you're going to see that in our primary and our lower L classrooms. The freedom of movement in the classroom is very important. There's a quote by Maria Montessori. I think it's the hand is the instrument of intellect, something like that, right? So what our hands do leaves an imprint on our brain. And we have a whole section in our primary classroom of sensorial, and that's actually our next parent education night next month. And also in the lower L classroom, everything is sensorial. Our math, that's why a lot of parents, when they come and see our math program, they thought, because it's just so practical and movement driven. So as the reasoning mind develops, the absorbent mind stops reasoning. So as the reasoning mind grows, right, the absorbent mind stops. That's why that absorbent mind, she says, is from 0 to 6, because that when that will comes into place and the reasoning mind starts to come into play. Any questions? Yes, Carmen.
Is this why they say that they want to try, at least attempt to try to have 1,000 books by the time you're 5, because it's going to shape the level of your vocabulary?
I would say yes, right? And I think a lot of people, and I've talked about this before a few years ago in a parent education night with language. I think parents, adults want to simplify language. And I am a believer that we should not be doing that, right? We want to use rich language with them. They may not understand it, but then eventually you start to explain it. And I often say, when my son was born, I would roll down those aisles and pick and save and Target and say, we're going down aisle number 1. These are Cheerios. These are, and he was literally 2 months. So using all of that, knowing that they just absorb all of that. So yeah, I would say the acquisition of language is in different, syntax and stuff like that is probably why they recommend reading. And reading out loud I still read out loud to my daughter, and she's 11. It's still very important. Now she's clearly out of the absorbent mind, but certainly reading books to babies is important. My family always makes fun of me because when we have a baby in the family, I'll just, start talking to them and they're like, they're not going to react. I'm like, well, eventually they will. So it's important that we are using those more advanced language skills with them, because they will acquire that. And you will start to notice that when they start talking, they will start using that. And I think that's, to your point, Carmen, exposing them to that language is important because they can use that then in conversation. And then hopefully they can start using it in their writing process as well. And in the primary classroom, we teach the children parts of a bird, parts of a fish, parts of a horse, parts of a turtle. So eventually when they start writing, that sort of broadens their language skills, right? Not, I just see a turtle, or I see a flower. Oh, I see the corolla on the flower. It has a beautiful stamen. Why does this flower not have a stamen and it has a pistil? So teaching all of that language is important. And again, they don't discriminate, right? Like what we would perceive as a negative space, and a positive space. So it's important that we're pouring the positives their way. So for us as adults, right, what do we do? How do we help with this absorbent mind? First, knowing that the child obviously is fragile and they need to feel safe. Even as adults, if we don't feel safe, it is often hard to learn. There have been a lot of psychology experiments that go with us, right? The adults in the elevator, right? You get in an elevator, somebody turns around, that makes you very uncomfortable. Well, that's an example, but in that mind, you're only thinking about that person. You're not really learning or thinking, if that makes sense. If you're going to like an adult education class, you tend to sit in the same spot, right? You want to be comfortable. So making sure they feel safe is a big part of that. They need deep and consistent love. Okay. Also, just being aware of the child or the baby's absorbent mind is important, because oftentimes, right, we have them there, we're making dinner, or they're in the other room. Again, just noting that they are picking up on all of this, even the culture that we're in, the conversations we're having with other people, the way we converse with other people. So being aware of it, I think, is half sometimes the battle for people. Also making sure that the environment that they're in allows movement, because again, our senses, their senses, are very important to picking up information from the environment. I'm going to go get him. Excuse me. Sorry, I'm back.
Yeah, I'm gonna take him on a walk.
Great. All right, so what am I saying? Oh, that the environment that allows movement. So even as they're beginning to explore their environment by crawling, thanks, Rob. Even as they're, beginning to explore their environment, crawling, that's what it's all about, right? They want to absorb everything in that environment. So having a safe place for them to move is important. And again, you'll see that in all of our classrooms. Students have the freedom of movement. We call it freedom with discipline. If they take advantage of that, we certainly can place them somewhere we think they are safe. But movement is very important in the Montessori classroom, and it should be for 0 to 6-year-olds as well, from 0 to 3-year-old at home. We talked about using that rich language for them. So offer the essence of something. I love this, and where things come from. Again, when you are at the store, even, with a 2 and 3-year-old, this is a lemon, and they see the whole produce section, but explaining to them, this is a lemon. It comes from a tree. It probably comes from Mexico, or, just explaining the essence of something. Lemons tend to be tart. Sometimes they're sweet. So having those conversations about things they're experiencing in the environment. And it's also important to give them freedom to interact with each other. And so that can be with peers or, with adults, because that's where a lot of their expression will come from, when you're allowing them to interact with each other and with adults. So I have 3 videos. I showed one video last year, so I'm going to show another video this year. So a lot of what she talks about just sort of encapsulates what I said. And of course, Maria Montessori has a 300-page book about Absorbent Mind. And so these are just sort of the touchstones, the main talking points for adults that I touched on here. So we will watch the video, but does anybody have any questions, comments? Okay. I am going to show you the video. Give me 1 minute.
Hey, Lisa, you have questions in the chat. Felicity wants to know where the recording is going to get posted for this video.
Sorry. Thank you, Nicole. Does everybody know how to access my YouTube channel? Okay, I will put that in the February newsletter. I don't think I want to put it on the Facebook page. I should have put that in the Wednesday Wireless. So I have gotten better. At the beginning of the school year, I made my own YouTube page. And so all of the parent education nights and Montessori mornings or any other messages I have, I put on the YouTube. And it's new this year, so I'm growing into it. And Natalia, our tech coordinator, was helping me with it. And then the transition from working from home happened, and she was working in my building. So I was sort of stuck for a couple months, but I started to upload more things on there so I can make sure that I give you guys that information in the February newsletter about where to go to my YouTube channel. Does that answer your question, Nicole?
It was Felicity's question. I was just reading it out of the chat.
Okay, thank you. So yes, it will be on my YouTube channel. Okay, let us, oops.
Characteristics of the absorbent mind. The first
Can you guys hear this?
is that it is unconscious.
And see it.
It operates in this unconscious way for the first 3 years of life. From the ages of about 3 to 6, it transitions into a more conscious manner. But it needs to be unconscious because it's taking the burden off of the child to determine what it is they need to absorb from the environment to lay those foundations for the future. The child simply can't do that. The next characteristic is this effortless absorption. It will take in anything with ease. It does not take any effort on the part of the child to be taking in these quantities of information. Next, it's non-discriminatory. It cannot determine what is good information and what is bad information. It takes everything in. And often you'll hear it referenced like a sponge. A sponge will soak up whatever liquid it's placed onto. Doesn't matter if it's clean or not, it's going to be taken in. And the child's mind, this absorbent mind, is operating in the very same fashion. It cannot determine what is good quality information and what might not be the best quality information to be taking in. It's also global. Now, this means that it is taking in everything. Dr. Montessori used the analogy of a camera to describe how this works. The adult's mind is much like, let's say, a painter. A painter chooses a subject and puts very intentional effort on the details of that subject. And the background generally isn't as clear or detailed. For the child, their mind is much like a camera. Everything that is in front of that lens is absorbed with perfection, perfect clarity. Just like when you take a picture, everything is going to be in focus. This absorbent mind is self-creative. Everything that is taken in is allowing the child to take that information to create the person that they're going to be. It is also universal. Every child, regardless of race, gender, or where they live, has this gift. Every human being has this gift of the absorbent mind for those first 6 years of life. So we can see just by looking at these characteristics how powerful this is for every child and how it can affect their self-construction in very profound ways. Next, we're going to take a look at how this absorbent mind is operating in the first 6 years of life.
Okay, so I think that video sort of encapsulated, a bit of what we talked about.
Hi everyone, welcome back to the Montessori Dictionary. And today I'd like to talk about.
I'm not still presenting, am I? That was just on my tab. Okay, that's the next one. Maybe I'll use her for it. I think that again just sort of encapsulates what we talked about. And that sort of made me think about like our virtues program and how we try to instill that. Again, we're talking after the absorbent mind. Oh, actually not, from 3 to 6, that's a conscious absorbent mind. But how we're trying to instill that use of language with those virtues, and just being sort of kind and compassionate human beings and exposing them to those virtues. And I think that's why that program is so important. And I'm glad we have it, and I'm glad parents are helping support that. Okay, does anyone have any questions, comments?
So I guess my question is since we know that this time frame is so short, what is the best way to maximize what's happening in the home that they're absorbing? Like if you had to prioritize, what is the things that you would say would be the top things we should do while the child is in this phase of life?
First and foremost, I think being conscious of it, right? A lot of times we move around and we're not even conscious of how we're moving or what we're saying. We interact with our spouses or our other children in a certain way without truly being conscious of it, right? So I think, again, that's sort of half the battle, is knowing that every thing that child takes in from the environment, they are absorbing. And so sometimes that can make you check yourself, right? On the language that you're using, the way you're speaking to other people. So I think that would be the first. And again, of course, that the language that we're using with them is very important. What else? I think that freedom of movement, especially from 0 to 3, oftentimes we can kind of crate them into a certain area, but it's, as long as your home is safe, child-proof, it's important for them to have that movement and for them to explore, right? We see babies picking up stuff and putting them in their mouth and using all of their senses to sort of gain the essence of something, right? I'm going to pick up this ball that I crawled to and touch it and smell it and see what it's all about. So in our adult state of mind, we can think, ew, gross, take that out of the baby's hand. But really, they're just trying to absorb the essence of something that they're picking up, if that makes sense. So I would say making sure we have a safe place for them. And again, in that last slide, and sometimes people think we're silly, but just making them feel safe in an environment, because again, if even as adults, if we don't feel safe, we tend not to open up. So we want our children feeling safe so that they may open up to us and open up that absorbent mind a little more. Because again, I think it's important to know that it's non-discriminatory, right? They are taking in everything, again, whether it's what we view as positive or negative. Does that answer your question, Carmen?
It does. So basically, we just need to be the best versions of ourselves for 6 years of their lives, which is all of them possible. Got it.
Hey, I did it not. Oh my gosh. I knew nothing about Montessori when my son was born. And so I think I've told people this and my daughter was, I think, 2 or 3 when I was going through Montessori training. So when I went, I thought, oh my gosh, like I felt horrible. And I was like, I want another baby because they're going to be so much smarter than my other 2, because even though I still had that, sort of state of mind, but it was just like, yeah, they truly are. And, we can tell that when they're even 4 or 5 months old, right? They follow you with their eyes at that young. So they are seeing that movement and they want to absorb that movement. And, we know this, right? If we use improper language, if we use bad language, which I sometimes do in my home, they will repeat it, because they absorbed it. They don't know. And so, a lot of times I had students in my classroom and they would use that. They would use the F-bomb very appropriately because they were absorbing that. It's not like they were just flipping it out there. It was like they were using it it's like, okay, you clearly hear that go. And,
guilty as charged. Guilty as charged.
Yes, and I actually heard that.
I know you did.
But again, it's just they don't know, right? And that's a perfect, I think, example of what we were talking about. They don't know whether that was negative or positive. That's just what they're hearing. They're hearing adults in their household, in their community, using that language. And, I hate to say, but in these times, there's, if they're seeing, we pick up on all of that. We pick up on that culture, how we treat other people, right? In this era of, not era because it's been going on, but like race relations, we pick up on that and on how our parents feel about people of different cultures. And are we welcoming other people into a home? Are we not? That absorbent mind absorbs all of that. So I think it's important. Again, the most important is just as adults being conscious of it. I think that's, again, half the battle. And, not everything is going to be positive, right? I mean, they are going to see and hear some things that they probably shouldn't, but that is a part of life. But just being aware that that time truly is crucial, because I think sometimes we think, 0 to 3, they're not doing much. No, they are doing everything, because by the time we get them in 3-year-old, they have very clear personalities at 3. they have clear personalities typically at 2. And we can see that when they come to us in the classroom. So thank you. Any other questions, comments? And again, I really hope to expand on, our library, like our reference section. And then again, I'm just sort of visualizing besides like a YouTube page, just resources for parents like this. So you don't have to come at 2 o'clock on a Thursday for you to all be reading more about Montessori. And clearly, it helps us because it engages parents, and I think it helps you understand the Montessori approach a lot better. We can be taken as very strange individuals sometimes, but really everything we do is intentional. So Maria Montessori was really an amazing woman, very educated. Obviously, she was the first woman in Italy to be given a medical degree. So, and a lot of what she wrote on and researched on was a lot of observation and just observing students and observing children. So, and I think it still stands to this day, which is a true testament. So, okay, no other questions?
Thank you.
You're welcome. Thank you all for coming. And then I shall share this on the YouTube page, hopefully by tomorrow. Okay. Thank you.
Sounds good. Thank you.